So finally, FP1 and 2 for the 24 Bahrain Grand Prix. The season opener is done. Very, very, very interesting. My name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. Straight up, let's take a look at the results. Starting off with FP1. Now, obviously, conditions-wise, during the day, not so relative in terms of qualifying or the race, because Bahrain is a race we get at night. Okay, so temperature-wise, it was pretty chilly there. It's quite windy as well. We know certain cars, the Williams habitually has been very much affected by the wind. The cars at the front typically run a bit better in the wind. But as you can see, there is a certain newly branded team sitting at the top of the timesheets. Daniel Ricciardo in his Racing Bulls, quicker than Lando Norris, both on the soft tyre, as was Oscar Piastri, 2.5 tenths down from Daniel, and Yuki Tsunoda just behind Oscar, 3 tenths down from Daniel. Now, of course, we know recently Zach has not been best pleased with Red Bull and their second team, their junior team, whatever you want to call it. And you know what? I get it, okay? I understand. I think this is a conversation going on in football at the moment as well, with multi-club ownership, and you know, you've got Girona, if they get Champions League, they can't play against City because they're both owned by the City group. And look, F1 is 10 teams, should be 11, if you ask me. Just bring in Andretti, but doesn't seem that's going to happen anytime soon. And there is certainly, regardless of where Racing Bulls are, whether they're towards the top, towards the back, there are valid questions as to whether we should allow, you know, 20, what are all the numbers? 20% of the grid to be owned by one entity rather than 10% of the grid, which is the way every other team is. Yes, of course you have relationships. Haas are very reliant on Ferrari. They're a customer at the end of the day. McLaren are a customer of Mercedes. Williams are a customer of Mercedes. And yes, Haas have a really close relationship with Ferrari, but there isn't ownership. There isn't boardroom level decisions. Now, of course, is there going to be preferences? We've seen many a time, okay, teams leverage their relationship with other teams. Mercedes using Williams as a driver academy, essentially, for George Russell, for example. But Williams benefited from that a lot as well, didn't they? They got a very good George Russell for 3 years in what was a very, very bad car for 3 years. And, I mean, it's as good as it's been for a long time right now. But it's not quite good enough to be right at the sharp end. So yes, FP1, Daniel Ricciardo at the sharp end. Let me know what you think of the whole Red Bull ownership thing. Like, does it bother you? I would rather it didn't exist for sure. I do agree fundamentally with Zach. Yes, of course, it's quite... as soon as the pace gets all right, then people start to complain. It was the same with Haas when Haas were doing well back in the day. In 2017 when they were pretty decent. It was only when they were doing well that people were complaining about their relationship with Ferrari. But anyway, that's besides the point. Looking at Haas, 4.6 seconds off K-Mag, 5.069 seconds off. Nice. Nico Hülkenberg in practice one. Now, don't go crazy, right? Because first and foremost, one lap pace was not Haas's problem last season. Of course, it wasn't quite at the level of Ferrari and Red Bull, but that wasn't their big issue. You know, Nico Hülkenberg, his average qualifying position was ahead of Albon, ahead of Tsunoda, ahead of Stroll even, in an Aston Martin over the course of last season in normal qualifying. Anyway, if you watched my quiz at the end of last year, you'll know that one. One lap pace isn't the issue, it's all about race running. Ayo Komatsu's come in and is clearly focusing on what has been a massive bugbear for this team. And at the end of the day, improving one lap pace is not going to change the outcome for that team. They need to focus on race runs. Like, they could qualify an average of they could qualify a couple of positions higher on average and still be stone dead last. Because it feels like, apart from Alpine, everyone's really closing up and race pace is king. And in this ground effect era, these cars are so sensitive aerodynamically that if you're not on it, you're not on it. So you know what? Fair play to Haas. They're not bothered about the one lap time. They're not bothered about the big, you know, getting all the plaudits and the highlights. If they'll be P19 and 20, and so be it. If it means they've got a better racing car, because the points are won on Sunday. So only interested in long runs. The one other point I wanted to make about FP1 as well is that the medium pace, so medium tyres, Fernando Alonso, Max Verstappen, George Russell, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. I'm not sure if Bottas had mediums, but I know them lot all were running mediums. And look, Fernando 0.324, Max 0.369, George 0.382, Charles 0.399, Lewis 0.433. Like, fine margins. Fine margins. If that's on the medium tyre, and again, we don't know fuel loads. Fuel loads is the big thing here. But possibly engine turning up, turning down as well could be a little factor here. But based off of this, and again, look, we can say we don't know what Red Bull are doing, but also Red Bull don't know what the other teams are doing. And, you know, Max is right in the middle of a Fernando George sandwich, which maybe he'd enjoy that. Look, at the end of the day, who wouldn't enjoy a Fernando George sandwich? Because they're good mates, all right? And they'd be great in the club. Now, of course, Bahrain is a tricky track, lots of slow speed corners, very different to a Suzuka, for example. So certain cars are going to, you know, suffer more here relative to more medium high speed corner. McLaren immediately comes to mind based off what we saw last year. The Astons and the Ferraris run well in those slow speed corner tracks. Red Bull just is quick everywhere. But looking at FP1, you know, Norris and Piastri, P2, 3, looking pretty good. Let's go on to FP2, shall we? A little bit different, and headline times at the top. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, 2 tenths between them. Fernando 3 tenths back from Lewis as well, so only a tenth off of George in the end. But Mercedes 1-2. Very interesting. Quickest time of 1:30.3. Now, of course, Carlos Sainz set the quickest time in testing, didn't he? It was a 29.6, 7, something like that. I can't actually remember. Max did his time on softs and he's at 1:30.8. We know Max can go quicker than that. We know that Max, look at who's behind Max Verstappen on that. Nico Hülkenberg. Like, fractionally behind Max as well, right? This is clearly not the optimum performance of that Red Bull. You know, Max going 30 thousandths quicker than Nico Hülkenberg. Mercedes 1-2 in FP2. That's in this qualifying evening, relative conditions looking closest to what we should expect for qualifying tomorrow anyway. Even after seeing that, I'm still like, I still don't think Mercedes will win a race in 2024. I still don't think it will happen. I still think this is one practice session and there's still so much unknown. But get excited about it. Why not? Why not? Look, the prospect of another team being able to fight with Red Bull, whoever that team is fascinating. Especially Red Bull in the hands of Max Verstappen, of course, because Checo's down there in P10. You know, a few tenths gap, 2.5 tenths, 3 tenths to Max, which is about where he was on average, clean lap wise, one lap shootout. So maybe, you know, Zach Brown thinks, you know, Mercedes maybe turned the engine up a little bit, turned up the wick. Obviously, they use the same engine. They buy their engine from Mercedes. So maybe he's like, oh, okay, we've got this engine. When we turn it up, we gain this much performance. It feels like they've probably done that to go quickest in FP2. Maybe. But, you know, Allison's back at the wheel. So we'll see tomorrow in qualifying whether or not this is gas. Because do I think Red Bull are really struggling? No, I don't. But look, start the season. They're only humans, okay? There's humans building these machines, and humans can make mistakes, okay? Humans can make mistakes, and maybe Red Bull won't get the car into the window. Look at F2. It was sidetrack. Prema, Antonelli, Behrman, nowhere. Both a second off. Pole, Kushmani, shout out, massive from the lab. Invicta have nailed it this year, and Prema, who are the most decorated Formula 2 team probably of all time, nowhere. They've absolutely dropped the bag, and they've got two of the most high potential drivers in motorsport right now. A second off. Just seen a pigeon have a poo outside, literally just caught eyes with it as I was saying that. It's not in the house, don't worry. It's outside the window. What I'm saying is that even the best can have an off day, and maybe that was a bit of an off day for Red Bull, but do I think that's indicative of a further issue? No. As I receive a phone call while I'm doing this. I'll call you back, Matt. Finally, Lando Norris down there in P20. Now, my understanding, listening to Zach talking, he had a bit of a stinker on his quali run, made a bit of a mistake. That's why he's right down there, and then was doing long runs towards the end. With Oscar, we saw at the end of last season, second half of the season, Oscar was much more competitive relative to Lando in qualifying. Can Lando iron out the mistakes? This has been the big question around Lando. Okay, because I don't think there's many other questions to ask around Lando. Can he keep it clean qualifying? Because race-wise, he's fine. But qualifying is so important. Even more so now that the field has really closed up. I mean, we thought it was close last year. It's going to be crazy close this year. Maybe not with Max and Red Bull. Maybe he will have enough of an advantage to be dominant, okay? But with the rest, I don't know. Lando, I hope this isn't a worrying sign of continued over-pushing in qualifying to make up. Because he does have the pace on Oscar. But it's fine margins at the top. This is why these lot are paid so generously. These are the best F1 drivers we've seen. In terms of the quality across the grid, they're not the 20 best drivers in the world, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of talent in many other disciplines that don't get the acknowledgement they deserve. But I think for a total standard, there's not a single rookie on the grid either this year. The standard's very high. So let me know what you think going into tomorrow. Quali prediction. Should we do a little quali prediction? Okay. So for me, pole position will be Max Verstappen. P2, I'm going Lewis Hamilton. P3, Sergio Perez. Let me know your three in the comments down below. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.